Commander William Jackson gripped the helicopter's overhead handle as the Black Hawk pitched and rolled through the early morning sky. His weathered face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as the first plume of black smoke appeared on the horizon. Forward Operating Base Alpha was burning. ETA 3 minutes, sir. The pilot's voice crackled through his headset. Jackson nodded silently. 20 years in the service had taught him to prepare for the worst. The intelligence housed at FOB Alpha was vital to ongoing operations, but more importantly, 24 of his soldiers were stationed there, men and women under his direct command. "Any radio contact?" he asked. "Negative, sir." Communications went dark right after the distress call. The initial report had been brief and chaotic. Enemy forces had somehow penetrated the perimeter and launched a surprise attack. The last transmission mentioned multiple explosions and casualties before cutting to static. Jackson's mind raced through contingency plans as the helicopter closed the distance. He'd ordered immediate reinforcements and medical evacuation teams, but they were still 30 minutes out, time that his soldiers might not have. As the Black Hawk banked sharply, the full scope of the disaster came into view. FOB Alpha's main structures were engulfed in flames. The ammunition depot on the eastern perimeter had been hit first, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction across the base. Secondary explosions continued to rock the compound as stored munitions cooked off. In the intense heat, "Find us an LZ," Jackson ordered, already unstrapping himself. "Far enough from the flames, but close enough for rapid deployment." The pilot complied, bringing the helicopter down in a clearing 300 meters from the base's main entrance. Jackson was on the ground before the skids fully settled, his M4 carbine at the ready. The 3 Rangers who had accompanied him fanned out in tactical formation. "Stay alert," he warned. "We don't know if hostiles are still in the area." Intelligence suggested the attack had been carried out by a specialized insurgent cell using Russian-made RPGs. The timing couldn't have been worse. The base had just received classified intelligence on enemy movements that could change the course of the conflict. As they approached the main gate, Jackson braced himself for what they would find inside. The last major base attack he'd witnessed had left 17 dead and dozens wounded. The scene before him now looked even worse, yet something was different. There was movement ahead, organized, purposeful movement. Through the smoke, he made out a figure directing 2 soldiers carrying a stretcher. The figure was smaller than the others, wearing a helmet with a distinctive Red Cross emblem. As Jackson drew closer, he realized it was combat medic specialist Sarah Rodriguez. "Commander!" she called out, spotting him. Her face was streaked. With soot, her uniform singed and bloodied, but her eyes were clear and focused. "We've established a casualty collection point 200 meters north of the perimeter." Jackson was momentarily speechless. He'd expected chaos, not coordination. "Report, specialist," he finally managed. "Sir, the attack came at 0430 hours. 3 RPGs hit the ammunition depot simultaneously. Captain Lewis and Lieutenant Parker were both injured in the initial blast. With the chain of command compromised, I initiated emergency protocols." Rodriguez's voice was steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "Sergeant Miller and I coordinated the evacuation while Corporal Thompson maintained security." She led Jackson toward a cluster of trees where dozens of soldiers were receiving medical attention. Some lay on stretchers, others sat with bandages around limbs or heads, but all were accounted for. "You evacuated everyone?" Jackson asked, surveying the scene with disbelief. "Yes, sir. 24 personnel, all accounted for. We had to get creative with the last few extractions." The barracks roof collapsed shortly after the initial explosions. Sergeant Miller and I used a partially damaged Humvee to break through the rear wall. I administered field triage as we extracted each soldier. Sergeant James Miller approached, his massive frame recognizable even through the smoke. The decorated veteran had served 3 tours and was known for his unflappable nature. "Sir," Miller nodded respectfully, "Rodriguez deserves full credit. When the comms went down and the officers were hit, she took charge immediately. Never seen anything like it. Jackson watched as Rodriguez returned to a wounded soldier, checking vital signs and adjusting an IV line. Despite the chaos around them, her movements were precise and methodical. She performed an emergency cricothyroidotomy on Staff Sergeant Walsh when debris crushed his trachea, Miller continued, admiration evident in his voice. Did it with a pocket knife and a ballpoint pen while the ammunition was still cooking off around us? Then she organized us into teams, extraction, security, and medical, even remembered to secure the intelligence files from the command center. A nearby explosion sent everyone ducking instinctively, but Rodriguez barely flinched as she continued treating her patient. The classified intelligence? Jackson asked. Miller patted a waterproof case secured to his chest. All here, sir. Rodriguez made it a priority. Said if she was going to save every soldier, she might as well save the mission too. The distant sound of helicopter rotors announced the arrival of the medical evacuation teams. Jackson watched as Rodriguez immediately began organizing the wounded by priority, directing her makeshift medical team with quiet authority. Commander, she approached after ensuring the most critical patients were loaded first. Permission to accompany the wounded to the field hospital. Jackson nodded. Granted. And Rodriguez? Exceptional work. For the first time, a hint of emotion crossed her face. Just doing my job, sir. 3 days later, at the field headquarters, Commander Jackson finished his official report. The investigation had confirmed that the attack was carried out by a specialized enemy unit that had studied the base's vulnerabilities. The classified intelligence, safely retrieved thanks to Rodriguez, had already led to the capture of 2 high-value targets. You wanted to see me, sir? Rodriguez stood at attention in the doorway, her uniform crisp, despite the bandage visible on her forearm. At ease, specialist, Jackson gestured to the chair opposite his desk. I've recommended you for the Silver Star. Rodriguez blinked in surprise. Sir, You demonstrated extraordinary heroism in a combat situation, Rodriguez. Your actions saved 24 lives and secured intelligence vital to national security. Jackson slid a document across the desk. I'm also recommending your promotion to sergeant. Thank you, sir, but I wasn't alone. Sergeant Miller, Corporal Thompson are also being recognized, Jackson assured her, but witnesses are unanimous. When everything was falling apart, you were the one who held it. Together. Rodriguez nodded, finally accepting the recognition. The medical training helps, sir. You learn to function when everything around you is chaos. You focus on what needs to be done. Jackson studied the young medic thoughtfully. In 20 years of military service, he'd learned that heroes rarely emerge where you expect them. Sometimes, they come in the form of a combat medic who refuses to leave anyone behind. The base can be rebuilt, he said finally. The intelligence can be gathered again, but the lives you saved, that's irreplaceable. As Rodriguez left his office, Commander Jackson added one final note to his report. In the midst of fire and chaos, it wasn't the highest-ranking officer or the most decorated soldier who emerged as a leader. It was a combat medic who remembered that our greatest asset isn't our weapons or our intelligence, it's our people. The drone swarm appeared on radar 60 seconds before impact. By then, it was already too late for Outpost Vigilant. Commander Alexandra Patton watched the tactical display with growing horror as 17 red dots converged on the forward reconnaissance base 20 miles north of her position. The Eastern European sky glowed orange on the horizon, visible even through the reinforced viewport of her Command Bradley fighting vehicle. How many personnel stationed at Vigilant? She demanded, already knowing the answer. Lieutenant Davis checked his tablet. 17, ma'am. Recon team under Captain Reynolds plus support staff. Patton's jaw tightened. The reconnaissance team had been monitoring Russian-backed separatist movements in the contested border region. Their intelligence had been crucial to coalition operations, which made them a high-value target. Now they were under attack with incendiary weapons, the separatists' newest tactic. All units, "This is Dagger Actual," she commanded over the tactical net. "Outpost Vigilant is under attack. We move now." The column of vehicles lurched forward, tracks churning through mud as they accelerated to maximum speed. Patton knew the response time would be too long, but they had to try. These were her soldiers, her responsibility. "Ma'am," Davis spoke hesitantly, "Vigilance gone dark. No communications." Patton nodded grimly. The drones would have targeted communications equipment first, standard procedure. She'd seen this pattern before. First communications, then ammunition. Stores, then systematic destruction of all structures. The Separatists left no survivors. "ETA 17 minutes, the driver announced. Too long, Patton thought. Far too long. Combat medic Kyle Murphy had been at Outpost Vigilant for exactly 3 days when the attack began. Long enough to inventory the medical supplies, establish his aid station, and earn the suspicion of most of the stationed personnel. His reputation had preceded him, demoted from sergeant to specialist for insubordination during his previous deployment, transferred repeatedly due to inability to conform to command structures. What his file didn't mention was his perfect record for keeping soldiers alive. When the first drone struck the communications array, Murphy was already moving. He'd developed a sixth sense for incoming attacks during his 4 previous deployments. While others ran for defensive positions, Murphy sprinted for the research laboratory at the eastern edge of the compound. "Murphy, where the hell are you going?" Captain Reynolds shouted as secondary explosions rocked the base. Murphy didn't bother responding. 60 seconds later, he emerged wearing the experimental XM-12 fire-resistant combat suit, a prototype that had been deemed too bulky for field use. Murphy had spotted it during his initial tour of the base and filed the information away. Now, as incendiary munitions rained down, turning Vigilant into an inferno, that information became invaluable. The next drone wave hit the ammunition depot. The resulting explosion knocked several soldiers off their feet and sent shrapnel slicing through the air. Murphy heard screams from the barracks as flames engulfed the building, trapping 6 soldiers inside. Without hesitation, he grabbed his M4 carbine, medical pack, and a coil of high-tensile cable from the supply shed. The fire-resistant suit would buy him minutes, not hours. He'd need to work fast. Commander Patton's vehicle crested the final ridge 17 minutes after the initial attack. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. Outpost Vigilant was no longer recognizable as a military installation. Every structure had collapsed or was still burning. Black smoke billowed into the morning sky, visible for miles, a beacon announcing the Separatists' successful strike. "Defensive positions," she ordered as the Bradley rolled to a stop. "Davis, prepare the QRF for search and rescue. I want drones up searching for survivors." As her team deployed, Patton scanned the perimeter through her binoculars. Experience told her what to expect. Bodies, wreckage, and perhaps a few survivors badly wounded and in desperate need of evacuation. What she didn't expect was movement. "At the tree line 200 meters east of the burning base. Contact east perimeter," she announced sharply. Then she paused, adjusting her focus. Not enemy contacts, survivors. Multiple survivors, gathered in a defensive formation around what appeared to be a makeshift medical station. "Hold positions," she countermanded. "Possible friendlies at the tree line." Patton personally led the approach team, weapon ready but pointed downward. As they drew closer, she could distinguish individual figures, American uniforms, some bandaged but mobile, and at the center, a single medic working furiously over a wounded soldier. "Commander on site," someone called out, and several soldiers snapped to attention despite their injuries. Patton lowered her weapon in disbelief. Every soldier from Outpost Vigilant was present, all 17 accounted for. Some were badly burned or wounded, but all were alive. "Report," she demanded of the nearest officer, a lieutenant with a bandaged head and singed uniform. "Ma'am, it was Murphy," the lieutenant responded, gesturing toward the medic. When the attack began, he went into the fire, multiple times, got everyone out before the structures completely collapsed. Patton approached the medic, who didn't look up from the chest wound he was treating. Specialist Kyle Murphy's fire-resistant suit was partially melted in places, revealing burned skin underneath. Yet his hands remained steady as he worked. "That should hold until medevac arrives," Murphy finally said to his patient before acknowledging Patton's presence. "Commander." "Specialist Murphy," Patton replied, studying him. "I'm told you're responsible for this miracle." Murphy shrugged. "No miracle, ma'am, just preparation and refusal to accept casualties. Lieutenant Davis tells me you retrieved all 17 personnel single-handedly, many from burning buildings. That you created a rope system to extract soldiers trapped in the collapsed bunker. That you carried Captain Reynolds half a mile with a broken femur. The XM-12 suit gave me approximately 12 minutes of fire protection per entry," Murphy explained matter-of-factly. "Enough time for 5 extraction runs. The rope system was necessary after the 3rd drone wave. As for the captain, he's not as heavy as he looks." Despite the situation, Patton found herself smiling. "Your file says you're a disciplinary problem." "Murphy, my file is accurate, ma'am. It also says you've never lost a patient under your care." "That part's accurate, too." A medevac helicopter appeared overhead, the first of several that would evacuate the wounded. As the medical teams descended, Patton pulled Murphy aside. "You disobeyed direct orders during the attack," she stated. Murphy straightened. "Captain, Reynolds ordered all personnel to defensive positions. With respect, ma'am, shooting at drones wouldn't save anyone. Entering burning buildings would. So you made your own assessment and implemented your own plan." "Yes, ma'am." Patton studied the medic's face. Exhausted, burned, but utterly resolute. In that moment, she recognized something she'd seen too rarely in her military career. A soldier who understood that sometimes saving lives required breaking rules. "The intelligence data?" she asked. Murphy reached into his medical pack and produced a scorched but intact hard drive. "Extracted from the command center during my 2nd run. Ma'am, figured it was important." Commander Patton accepted the drive with a newfound respect. Throughout her career, she had valued discipline and adherence to protocol above all else. Today, she was confronted with irrefutable evidence that sometimes the most valuable quality in a soldier was the courage to trust their own judgment. "Specialist Murphy," she said finally, "when we return to headquarters, I'll be recommending you for the Silver Star and reinstatement to your previous rank." Murphy finally showed surprise. "Ma'am?" "Sometimes the right thing and the regulation thing aren't the same," Patton said, watching as the last of the wounded were loaded into medevac helicopters. "Today you taught me that lesson. I won't forget it."